Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the second last episode of the Ottoman Empire series on AI Deen Vision. Today, we present our penultimate episode in this epic saga, the story of the final years of one of history's greatest Muslim empires. By the dawn of the 20th century, the once mighty Ottoman state was known as the sick man of Europe, its territories shrinking, its economy struggling, and its political system in turmoil. The final sultans, Mehmed V and Mehmed VI, would witness the dissolution of an empire that had stood for over 600 years. In this episode, we'll analyze the complex forces that led to the Ottoman collapse, the rise of nationalism throughout the empire's territories, the devastating impact of World War I, the final political struggles between reformers and traditionalists, and ultimately the abolition of the sultanate itself. This is not merely a story of decline, but one that contains profound lessons about governance, modernization, identity, and the challenges of adapting ancient institutions to a rapidly changing world. The Ottoman Empire's fall would reshape the modern Middle East and set the stage for the birth of the Republic of Turkey, which we'll explore in our final episode. Join us as we chronicle the fall of the empire, a pivotal chapter in Islamic history where tradition and modernity collided with world-altering consequences. By 1909, the Ottoman Empire was a shadow of its former self. Once stretching across 3 continents, it had lost most of its European territories, was economically dependent on European powers, and faced growing nationalist movements throughout its remaining lands. Sultan Abdul Hamid II had ruled as an absolutist monarch since 1876, initially promising constitutional reforms before suspending the constitution and parliament. His authoritarian rule and secret police created an atmosphere of fear, even as he attempted modernization projects and tried to promote pan-Islamic unity to counter European imperialism. Opposition to Abdul Hamid's rule coalesced around a group known as the Committee of Union and Progress, CUP, commonly called the Young Turks. Made up of military officers, intellectuals, and reformers, they demanded the restoration of the 1876 constitution and parliamentary government. In July 1908, the Young Turks launched their revolution from Macedonia. Army units refused to suppress the rebellion, and Abdul Hamid was forced to restore the constitution. Elections were held, bringing a new parliament to power. However, the Sultan remained on the throne, creating a tense power-sharing arrangement. In April 1909, a counter-revolution erupted in Istanbul, with conservative religious elements demanding a return to Sharia law and opposing the secular reforms of the Young Turks. Initially successful, the counter-revolution was ultimately crushed when the Young Turk-aligned Army of Action marched on Istanbul. The Committee of Union and Progress used this opportunity to depose Abdul Hamid II. On April 27, 1909, the parliament formally removed the Sultan from power. The man chosen to replace Abdul Hamid was his 64-year-old brother, Mehmed Resad, who took the regnal name Mehmed V. Having spent most of his life in seclusion in the palace, Mehmed was seen as a pliable figure who would not interfere with the CUP's agenda. Upon his accession, Mehmed V declared, "I will protect the rights of all my subjects and dedicate myself to their happiness and welfare." However, the real power now lay with the Committee of Union and Progress. The Sultan had become largely ceremonial, a constitutional monarch in a system increasingly dominated by the military and civilian leadership of the Young Turks. The period from 1909 to 1913 saw the Ottoman Empire operating as a constitutional monarchy, with the Committee of Union and Progress holding effective power. Initially embracing a liberal, multi-ethnic vision for the empire, the CUP gradually shifted toward Turkish nationalism as territorial losses mounted. The leadership triumvirate that would eventually dominate consisted of Enver Pasha, military affairs, Talat Pasha, internal affairs, and Kemal Pasha, naval affairs. These men would guide Ottoman policy during its final decade. External pressures quickly mounted. In 1911, Italy invaded Libya, one of the empire's last North African possessions, in what became known as the Italo-Turkish War. Despite Ottoman resistance, the empire was forced to cede Libya to Italy by October 1912. Even more devastating were the Balkan Wars of 1912 to 1913. In the First Balkan War, an alliance of Bulgaria, Greece, Montenegro and Serbia declared war on the Ottoman Empire. Within weeks, Ottoman forces were overwhelmed, losing nearly all remaining European territories, except for a small foothold around Istanbul. The Balkan defeats were traumatic for the Ottoman leadership. The empire lost 83% of its European territory and nearly 70% of its European population. Over 400,000 Muslim refugees fled to Anatolia, creating enormous humanitarian challenges. In January 1913, as the government was negotiating the humiliating Treaty of London to end the First Balkan War, Enver Pasha led an armed raid on the Sublime Porte, Ottoman government offices. Known as the Raid on the Sublime Porte, this coup solidified KUP control and ended the experiment with liberal democracy. Enver Pasha, Talat Pasha, and Kemal Pasha now established what historians describe as a dictatorial triumvirate. Sultan Mehmed V remained a figurehead, retaining his religious authority as caliph but wielding little political power. The CUP embarked on an intensive modernization program, especially targeting the military. German advisors, led by General Otto Liman von Sanders, were brought in to reorganize the army. The empire's increasing ties to Germany would prove fateful as Europe moved toward war. In June 1914, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo triggered the chain of events leading to World War I. As European powers mobilized for war, the Ottoman Empire initially declared neutrality. However, War Minister Enver Pasha and other CUP leaders believed aligning with Germany offered the best chance to regain lost territories and end European interference in Ottoman affairs. On August 2, 1914, the Ottoman Empire signed a secret alliance with Germany. Two German warships, the Goeben and Breslau, pursued by British vessels, were allowed to enter Ottoman waters and were subsequently purchased by the Ottoman Navy in a paper transaction, remaining under German command but flying Ottoman flags. On October 29, 1914, these ships, now renamed Yavuz Sultan Selim and Midilli, conducted a surprise attack on Russian ports in the Black Sea. Russia declared war on the Ottoman Empire on November 2nd, followed by Britain and France on November 5th. The Ottomans had formally entered World War I on the side of the Central Powers. In his capacity as caliph, Sultan Mehmed V was persuaded to declare jihad, holy war, against the Allied powers. The German Kaiser hoped this would incite Muslims in British, French and Russian territories to rebel. However, the call had limited impact, as many Arab Muslims, encouraged by growing nationalist sentiments, remained loyal to the Allies or pursued their own independence. Mehmed V, despite his titular leadership, had little influence over these critical decisions. Now, in his 70s and in declining health, he functioned as a symbolic figure while the CUP leadership directed the war effort. The Ottoman War experience, 1914 to 1918, the Ottoman Empire found itself fighting on multiple fronts against Russia in the Caucasus, British forces in Mesopotamia and Palestine, and at the Dardanelles, where Allied forces attempted to capture Istanbul through the Gallipoli campaign. The Caucasus campaign began disastrously when Enver Pasha personally led an offensive against Russian forces in December 1914. Poor planning and harsh winter conditions led to catastrophic losses at the Battle of Sarıkamış, where an estimated 60,000 to 90,000 Ottoman soldiers perished, many from exposure rather than combat. The empire achieved its most significant victory at Gallipoli in 1915 to 1916, when Allied forces attempted to secure the Dardanelles Strait to open a supply route to Russia and capture Istanbul. Ottoman defenders, led by Colonel Mustafa Kemal, later Ataturk, successfully repelled the invasion. This triumph came at a tremendous cost, approximately 250,000 casualties on each side, but prevented the fall of the capital and boosted Ottoman morale. In Mesopotamia, British forces advanced from Basra toward Baghdad. After initial Ottoman successes, including the British surrender at Kut in April 1916, Baghdad fell to British forces in March 1917. In Palestine, British forces under General Edmund Allenby captured Jerusalem in December 1917 and advanced northward through 1918. The empire also faced internal rebellion. In June 1916, Sharif Hussein bin Ali of Mecca launched the Arab revolt against Ottoman rule, supported by British advisors like T.E. Lawrence of Arabia. The revolt further strained Ottoman military resources and signaled the growing strength of Arab nationalism. Meanwhile, Britain and France were already planning the post-Ottoman future of the Middle East. The secret Sykes-Picot Agreement of 1916 outlined their proposed division of Ottoman territories after the war. These plans demonstrated that, regardless of battlefield outcomes, the days of Ottoman rule in the Arab provinces were numbered. One of the darkest chapters of this period was the Armenian tragedy. As the war intensified, the Ottoman government viewed the Christian Armenian population with increasing suspicion, especially after some Armenians supported Russian forces in the Caucasus. In April 1915, the Ottoman government began arresting Armenian intellectual and community leaders in Istanbul. Soon after, the government ordered the deportation of Armenians from eastern Anatolia to Syria and Mesopotamia. What followed was a humanitarian catastrophe. Hundreds of thousands of Armenians died during forced marches through harsh terrain with inadequate provisions. Many others were killed outright. By the war's end, an estimated 1 to 1.5 million Armenians had perished. The events remain deeply controversial. Many historians classify them as genocide, a deliberate attempt to destroy the Armenian people. The Turkish government acknowledges that many Armenians died during this period, but attributes the deaths to the general chaos of war, disease and famine that affected all Ottoman subjects. This tragedy has left lasting wounds in the region and continues to affect international relations to this day. As the war ground on, Sultan Mehmed V's health deteriorated. Having reigned for 9 years as a constitutional monarch with limited power, he died on July 3, 1918, at the age of 73. Despite his lack of political authority, he was respected for his piety and dignified bearing during a tumultuous period. His brother Mehmed Vahiduddin succeeded him as Mehmed VI, the 36th and final sultan of the Ottoman dynasty. Mehmed VI inherited a crumbling empire facing imminent defeat. Mehmed VI was 57 when he ascended the throne. Unlike his predecessor, he was determined to reassert sultanic authority. Intelligent and well-educated, he had traveled abroad and understood the empire's precarious position. His first months in power coincided with the final Ottoman military collapse. Allenby's forces broke through in Palestine in September 1918, capturing Damascus and Aleppo. On the Macedonian front, Bulgaria's surrender left Ottoman territories exposed. On October 30, 1918, the Ottoman Empire signed the Armistice of Mudros aboard a British warship in the Aegean Sea. The terms were harsh. The Ottomans had to demobilize their armed forces, surrender all garrisons outside Anatolia, and allow Allied forces to occupy strategic points, including the Bosporus and Dardanelles Straits. World War I had cost the empire dearly, approximately 725,000 military deaths and countless civilian casualties. The empire was economically devastated, its remaining territories vulnerable to occupation and its government at the mercy of the victorious Allies. On November 13, 1918, an Allied fleet entered the Bosporus, beginning the occupation of Istanbul. British, French and Italian forces would control the Ottoman capital for the next 4 years. Mehmed VI's strategy was to cooperate with the occupiers, hoping to preserve the monarchy and as much territory as possible. He dissolved parliament in December 1918 and appointed a series of compliant governments to work with Allied authorities. The empire's territories were systematically dismembered. French forces occupied Cilicia in southern Anatolia. Italian troops landed at Antalya. In May 1919, Greek forces, with Allied approval, occupied Izmir and began advancing inland. The Arab provinces were placed under British and French mandates according to the framework established in the Sykes-Picot Agreement. Mesopotamia, Iraq and Palestine came under British control, while Syria and Lebanon were assigned to France. As foreign occupation spread, Turkish national resistance began forming in Anatolia. Mustafa Kemal Pasha, the hero of Gallipoli, arrived in Samsun on May 19, 1919, ostensibly as an inspector for the Sultan, but actually to organize resistance. The Allied powers formalized their partition of the Ottoman Empire in the Treaty of Sevres, signed on August 10, 1920. The treaty's terms were devastating. The Ottoman Empire would lose all non-Turkish territories, eastern Thrace and the area around Izmir would go to Greece, and independent Armenia would be established in eastern Anatolia, the Bosporus and Dardanelles would be internationalized, Kurdistan would receive autonomy with the possibility of independence, Ottoman armed forces would be severely limited. Ottoman finances would remain under Allied control. Sultan Mehmed VI's government in Istanbul, under Allied occupation, signed the treaty. However, the emerging nationalist government in Ankara, led by Mustafa Kemal, rejected it completely. By September 1919, Mustafa Kemal had organized the Sivas Congress, which established a representative committee to coordinate the national resistance. This body rejected foreign mandates and occupation, demanding complete independence for Turkish territories. The Sultan's government attempted to suppress this movement, issuing religious rulings, fatwas, against the nationalists, and sending loyalist forces to confront them. These efforts failed as the nationalist movement gained strength. On April 23, 1920, Mustafa Kemal established the Grand National Assembly in Ankara, effectively creating a parallel government to the Sultan's administration in Istanbul. The assembly declared that sovereignty belonged to the nation, not the monarch. Fighting intensified on multiple fronts. In the east, Turkish forces defeated the newly proclaimed Republic of Armenia by December 1920. In the south, French troops eventually withdrew from Cilicia after facing fierce resistance. The most critical fighting occurred against Greek forces who had penetrated deep into Anatolia by 1921. In the Battle of Sakarya in August-September 1921, Turkish nationalist forces under Mustafa Kemal halted the Greek advance in a 22-day battle. Mustafa Kemal was given the title Ghazi, victorious warrior, by the Grand National Assembly. The final Turkish offensive began in August 1922. Within 2 weeks, Greek forces were in full retreat. On September 9th, Turkish troops entered Izmir. During the chaotic period that followed, a fire broke out that destroyed much of the city's Greek and Armenian quarters, symbolically ending centuries of multicultural Ottoman society. As nationalist forces moved toward Istanbul and the Dardanelles, they confronted British troops at Çanak, nearly triggering a new war. Diplomatic negotiations prevented further fighting, and on October 11, 1922, the Armistice of Mudanya ended the military phase of the Turkish War of Independence. With military victory secured, Mustafa Kemal moved to formalize the end of the Ottoman monarchy. On November 1, 1922, the Grand National Assembly voted to separate the sultanate from the Caliphate, abolishing the former while temporarily retaining the latter. Sultan Mehmed VI, fearing for his safety and seeing his position as untenable, requested British protection. On November 17, 1922, he boarded the British warship HMS Malaya and departed Istanbul, never to return to Turkish soil. He would spend his remaining years in exile in San Remo, Italy, where he died on May 16, 1926. The assembly appointed his cousin, Abdülmecid II, as Caliph, a purely religious position with no political authority. This arrangement would last until March 1924, when the Caliphate itself was abolished, ending 13 centuries of this Islamic institution. The nationalist victory led to new peace negotiations. The Treaty of Lausanne, signed on July 24, 1923, replaced the unimplemented Treaty of Sèvres. The new treaty recognized Turkish sovereignty over Anatolia and eastern Thrace, established Turkey's current borders, and ended capitulations and foreign financial control. On October 29, 1923, the Grand National Assembly proclaimed the Republic of Turkey, with Ankara as its capital and Mustafa Kemal as its first president. The Ottoman Empire, after 624 years, 36 sultans, and rule over 3 continents, had come to an end. The fall of the Ottoman Empire represents one of history's most significant transitions. A 6th-century imperial tradition that had shaped the Islamic world and European history came to an end amidst the ruins of World War I and nationalist movements. The final sultans, Mehmed V and Mehmed VI, were in many ways tragic figures. Ruling during a period of irreversible decline, they witnessed the disintegration of an imperial system that had long since failed to adapt to the modern world. Mehmed V reigned as a figurehead, while the Young Turks led the empire into a catastrophic war. Mehmed VI attempted to salvage what he could through cooperation with occupying powers, only to see a nationalist movement reject his authority entirely. The Ottoman collapse teaches us profound lessons about governance and change. First, failure to reform effectively in times of challenge can lead to disaster. The Tanzimat reforms and later modernization efforts came too late and were often implemented inconsistently. Second, the rise of nationalism proved incompatible with the multi-ethnic, multi-religious imperial model. The Ottoman millet system, which had accommodated diversity for centuries, could not withstand the modern concept of the nation-state. Third, economic dependency enabled foreign powers to exert damaging influence over Ottoman affairs. The empire's debt crisis in the late 19th century significantly restricted its sovereignty. Finally, military defeat, especially in World War I, exposed these underlying weaknesses and accelerated imperial collapse. Yet from these ashes emerged the modern Republic of Turkey, a nation that would forge a new identity while carrying forward elements of its Ottoman heritage. Next time, in our final episode, the creation of modern Turkey, from empire to republic and lessons for today. We'll explore how Mustafa Kemal Ataturk transformed the remnants of the Ottoman state into a modern secular republic. We'll examine his sweeping reforms from alphabet and dress to law and education that fundamentally reshaped Turkish society. We'll also reflect on the complex Ottoman legacy in modern Turkey and throughout former imperial territories. How do contemporary societies view this imperial past? What aspects of Ottoman governance, culture, and religious practice continue to influence the Islamic world today? Join us for this concluding chapter in our journey through one of history's greatest Muslim empires, as we connect past to present and contemplate what lessons the Ottoman experience offers for Muslim societies in the modern era. Thank you for watching this second-last episode of our Ottoman Empire series on AI Deen Vision. If you found this historical journey valuable, please consider subscribing to our channel and sharing this video with others who might benefit. For more content exploring Islamic history, civilization, and thought, visit our YouTube channel AI Deen Vision. Remember to join us for our final episode on the creation of modern Turkey and the enduring legacy of the Ottoman Empire. May Allah increase us all in beneficial knowledge. Allah Hafiz.